A lonely cowboy kneels at a wooden cross. His hand shakes, gun pressed to his temple. But he is not alone. A boy is watching. Gunfire cracks through the canyon. A ruthless land baron lifts his weapon. An old man bleeds beneath the cross. A wild Mustang bursts through fire and smoke. A boy screams, torn between fear and love. Then, dawn breaks over Dry Creek. Where death once ruled, family is found. The truth, buried for decades, finally rises. Because sometimes, a cross does not mark an ending. It marks the place where a family begins. They say the Dry Creek no longer carries water, only silence. But silence remembers. It remembers betrayal, loss, and the names men tried to bury. Tonight, under a sky like iron, one old cowboy comes to end his wait. If you've ever wondered how far grief can drive a man, or how a single child can change a destiny, stay with me. Comment below if a story has ever stayed in your heart, and subscribe so you don't miss how Dry Creek still speaks. The canyon stretched wide, cut deep into the land like a scar that never healed. Dry Creek wound through its center, nothing more than cracked stone, dust, and a scatter of weeds clinging to life. Above, jagged ridges burned red with the last light of day. A hawk circled, its cry slicing the silence. The wind stirred dust into thin spirals. It whispered through sagebrush, rattled the dry grass, carried with it the weight of years. No cattle load, no wagon wheels creaked, only stillness, heavy as a coffin lid. The land felt abandoned, yet waiting, as though it knew tonight something would break. 68, but grief made him older. His back stooped, his steps slow but deliberate. Silver hair lay uneven across his brow, his beard untamed, framing a face weathered by sun and sorrow. His storm-gray eyes carried the heaviness of years spent alone. He wore a patch coat pulled tight against the cold, boots cracked and dry, spurs dulled to silence. No horse trailed him, no family waited at home. Once, he had been a name across these canyons, a rider swift, a rancher proud. But loss had hollowed him out. In one hand, he held a revolver, old steel worn smooth. In the other, a dried wildflower, brittle but precious, the last his wife had touched before death. Eli reached the bend in the creek where a wooden cross leaned among the stones. Weathered, nameless, it marked the place where his wife's memory lived. No grave beneath, only ashes carried away long ago. He sank to his knees. The earth was cold, hard. He placed the flower at the base of the cross, bowed his head, and whispered words half prayer, half curse. "You're gone," his voice cracked, "and I'm still here. God help me, I'm still here." The wind rose, tugging at his coat. Eli drew the revolver. His thumb eased the hammer back, slow, certain. "I've had enough empty mornings," he said, the words breaking in his throat. "Tonight I ride where you've gone." Then, movement, a faint scuff of stone, a shadow shifting near the canyon wall. Eli lifted his gaze. A boy crouched behind a boulder, no older than 12, thin, hair the color of straw falling in messy strands, clothes torn and mismatched, one boot nearly split at the sole. Dust streaked his face, but his eyes, bright green, wide, fixed on Eli with a mixture of fear and stubbornness. Eli froze. The revolver still hovered near his temple. The boy's chest rose and fell like a trapped animal's, but he didn't run. He just stared, silent. And, in that silence, Eli's world shifted. The boy's eyes dragged memory out of Eli's chest, a memory sharp as glass. His daughter, years ago, in this very place, laughing as she wrapped her arms around a foal. "Papa, he's mine. He trusts me." Her voice echoed in the canyon still. The revolver trembled in Eli's grip. The wildflower shivered at the foot of the cross. The boy leaned forward, lips parting, ready to break the silence. Eli's finger brushed the trigger. The hammer clicked. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Steel pressed hard against Eli's temple. The boy, eyes wide with terror, opened his mouth to shout. And the night cut to black. Eli Mercer's finger brushed the trigger. Steel pressed against his temple. The boy's mouth opened, a shout building in his chest. "Stop!" The voice cut through the canyon like a whip crack. A stone clattered against rock, thrown sharp and sudden. Eli flinched. The revolver slipped from his grip, striking the dirt with a dull thud. The silence that followed was thunderous. Eli's storm-gray eyes jerked toward the figure stepping out from behind the boulder. The boy's chest heaved, face pale beneath streaks of dust. His hands trembled, but his eyes, green, bright, and stubborn, did not waver. "You don't get to do that," the boy said, breath ragged. "Not while I'm watching." Eli stared at him, heart pounding, ears still ringing from the boy's shout. The revolver lay half buried in dust between them. For a long moment neither moved. The canyon seemed to tighten around them, holding the weight of two broken lives. "Who in God's name are you?" Eli rasped. His voice was low, raw. The boy hesitated, then took a step closer. He looked no more than 12, thin to the bone, shoulders hunched under a ragged shirt that hung loose from his frame. His trousers were patched with rough stitches, one boot nearly flapping apart. Blonde hair stuck in wild tangles across his forehead, and his skin was pale, as if hunger had gnawed at him for too long. "My name's Malachi," he said finally, voice carrying more defiance than strength. "And I wasn't about to let you do that." Eli blinked. Malachi, a name like scripture, falling strange and sharp in the canyon air. "You should have kept walking," Eli muttered. He reached for the revolver, but the boy's sudden movement stopped him. Malachi kicked the gun back with his worn boot, dust spraying. "I said no," the boy snapped. His words shook, but the fire in his eyes did not. Eli studied him in silence, jaw tight. Then, with a sigh that carried years of weariness, he pushed himself to his feet. His knees cracked, his body groaning like the canyon itself. The wind shifted, carrying the boy's smell, dust, sweat, and something faintly sour, the scent of a child too long without home. "You run from town?" Eli asked, eyes narrowing. Malachi's lips pressed thin. He looked away toward the barren creek bed. "Don't got a home," he said softly. "Been on my own a while." Eli's gaze hardened. He had seen boys like this before, living on scraps, stealing when they had to. "You've been taking from the market," Eli said flatly. The boy's head snapped back, startled. "I only took bread," Malachi said quickly, as if bracing for a blow. "And once a potato sack. I swear I ain't no thief, not really, just—" His voice cracked. "Just hungry." Eli's mouth tightened, but he didn't answer. He knew the truth in that tone. Hunger wore the same voice no matter the child. Malachi shifted, restless under Eli's stare. As he did, something glinted at his neck, a thin leather cord, nearly hidden beneath his shirt collar. A pendant dangled from it, catching the last of the light. Eli's breath stopped. "Hold still," he said, stepping forward. His hand, scarred and shaking, reached for the pendant. The boy recoiled, clutching it to his chest. "Don't touch it," Malachi snapped. "It's mine." But Eli's eyes had already seen. The silver locket, worn and dulled by time, engraved with a small, delicate flower. He knew it as surely as he knew the lines of his own hand, because he had given it, years ago, to his daughter. His storm-gray eyes widened, filling with something fierce, something almost wild. "Where did you get that?" His voice cracked like thunder. Malachi froze. His knuckles whitened as he clutched the locket tighter. His gaze flickered, searching for escape, but there was nowhere to run. The canyon walls pressed high on every side. "I asked you," Eli growled, stepping closer. "Where did you get that necklace?" The boy's face went pale. His lips parted, but no words came. His chest heaved, his whole body trembling like a trapped colt. The canyon wind roared suddenly, carrying grit across their faces. The cross at Dry Creek leaned in the shadows, watching over the confrontation as if it too demanded an answer. Eli's fists clenched. His world spun, memories of his daughter's laughter, of the night she vanished, of the years of searching that ended only in rumors and silence. And now, this boy, this child, standing before him, wearing her locket like a brand. "Speak!" Eli thundered. His voice echoed off the stone walls, startling the hawk that wheeled above. But Malachi shook his head, lips pressed tight. His eyes shone with something between terror and defiance. Eli towered over him, grief boiling into anger. "That locket belonged to my blood. You tell me now, how came you by it?" Malachi's knees buckled. He stumbled back, clutching the pendant with both hands, tears glimmering in his eyes. And still, he said nothing. Eli loomed above, fury and desperation mingling in his storm-gray eyes. "Kao le no o jiao?" he demanded again, voice shaking the canyon. Malachi's lips trembled, his whole body quivered, but no sound escaped. He stood frozen, silent, the truth buried inside him. The canyon held its breath. The answer hung in the balance. Eli's demand still echoed in the canyon. "Where did you get it?" Malachi said nothing. His lips trembled, but no answer came. The locket gleamed faintly at his throat, as if mocking the silence between them. Eli's chest heaved. Anger burned, but so did something sharper, heavier, fear of the truth he might already know. With a growl, he shoved the revolver back into its holster and jerked his head toward the trail. "Come," he ordered, voice low. "We'll settle this at the cabin." They walked under moonlight, the canyon walls closing around them. Malachi trudged behind, shoulders hunched, one hand clutching the locket. He looked small against the vast night, a stray swallowed by wilderness. Eli's cabin rose from the ridge, built of pine logs long grayed by weather. The roof sagged, porch boards bowed, but it still stood, stubborn as the man himself. Eli pushed the door open, lit a lantern, and warm light filled the gloom. Inside, the single room bore the weight of years. A cot sagged in one corner, the wool blanket worn thin. The stove was cold, its iron belly empty. On a shelf, a scattering of chipped mugs and tin plates leaned crooked. A smell of dust, leather, and pine clung to the air. "Sit," Eli said gruffly, pointing at a wooden stool. Malachi obeyed, lowering himself carefully, ready to flee if he had to. His green eyes flicked around the cabin, curious but guarded. For a time, silence ruled. The lantern hissed. Outside, the wind whispered through dry branches. Eli leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You're too young to be wandering. You'll die out there alone," Malachi's chin lifted. "I didn't choose it. Mama, she's gone, been gone a while." His voice wavered, but there was grit in it, the hard edge of a boy forced to survive. "You live by stealing," Eli pressed. Malachi flushed, eyes dropping. "Only when I had no choice. Bread, potatoes, just enough to keep going. I ain't proud of it." Eli studied him, thin arms, clothes patched and failing, eyes both defiant and afraid. The boy was raw, worn by hunger, and nights spent cold. Yet there was something in him that pulled at Eli's chest, a shadow of someone he had loved and lost. A sudden sound outside broke the stillness. A snort, deep and sharp, followed by the scrape of hooves on stone. Eli rose, grabbed the lantern, and opened the door. Moonlight spilled across the yard. There, just beyond the porch, stood a Mustang, coat chestnut red, mane black as coal, muscles taut under the pale glow. Its eyes caught the lantern light, glowing fierce, wild. "Rust," Eli muttered. "Wildest Mustang in these canyons. Don't let men near." But Rust wasn't watching Eli. His gaze fixed on the boy inside. Malachi stood slowly, drawn forward. He stepped out into the cold night, the lantern glow following him. Rust snorted, stamped, but didn't bolt. Instead, he lowered his head, ears flicking, as though measuring the boy. Malachi stretched a thin hand, trembling. Rust leaned in, muzzle brushing his palm. The boy's lips parted in awe. For the first time, his face softened, shadows of fear lifting. "He ain't wild," Malachi whispered. "Not to me." Eli froze in the doorway. The sight cut deep. His daughter, years ago, laughing as she cradled a foal in this very yard. Now, this boy, touching Rust like it was meant to be. Back inside, Eli's voice came hoarse. "Your mama? She ever tell you more? About where she came from?" Malachi nodded faintly, fingers still curled around the locket. "She said this necklace was all she had left from her past. Said it was from someone she loved, but couldn't speak about. She told me to guard it, no matter what. And once, just once, she said he lived near Dry Creek, a man with eyes like storms." Eli stiffened, his breath caught. He gripped the table's edge, knuckles whitening. "Eyes like storms," he repeated. His storm-gray gaze burned through the lamplight. Memories rose like ghosts. Clara's laughter, Clara's sudden disappearance, his endless search that ended only in grief. His body trembled, his throat tightened around words he could hardly believe. Eli's voice broke into a whisper, nearly swallowed by the wind outside. "Lord help me." He stared at Malachi, chest heaving. Could you be her boy?" The lantern flame flickered. Malachi's green eyes shone wide, filled with questions he couldn't voice. Eli's hands shook as he reached toward the locket, the truth crashing over him. This boy, this ragged orphan, might be his own blood, his grandson. And Eli Mercer, alone for so long, stood stunned at the edge of a revelation that could change everything. The screen fades to black. Eli's whispers still lingered in the cabin. "Lord, help me. You could be her boy." The words shook the air like thunder, but Malachi stayed silent, clutching the silver locket tight against his chest. Eli turned away, heavy with a truth he could hardly bear. Then his voice came rough, as though torn from stone. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." The canyon was pale under dawn light when they stepped outside. The cold pressed hard, turning their breath into mist. Rust followed without a rope, his chestnut coat shimmering faintly in the morning. He tossed his mane and blew steam, his hooves crunching on frost-stiff grass. Malachi hugged his thin jacket tighter. His eyes never left Eli's back. The old man walked with the slow but steady gait of someone who carried years of grief on his shoulders. They climbed a narrow path that wound between rocks and stunted pines. The higher they went, the more the air smelled of earth and pine needles. Birds stirred in the trees, but their calls were muted, as if even they knew silence was required here. At the top, a small graveyard appeared, fenced with warped planks leaning at odd angles. Weeds grew tall between the stones, some toppled, some weathered smooth. The place looked forgotten, except for the wind that whispered through the grass like voices too faint to understand. Eli stopped at one grave near the center, a wooden cross, cracked and gray, tilted slightly in the soil, the name carved faintly into it, Clara. Eli sank to his knees. His hand, scarred and trembling, reached out to touch the cross. "This is what they gave me," Eli said softly, voice thick. "A name on wood. They told me my daughter died in town. Fever, they said. I buried what was left, but never believed it whole. Still, he broke off, jaw tightening. Still, I came here, year after year, asking why God let it be Malachi's throat worked. He dropped to his knees beside Eli, staring at the cross with wide eyes. My mama, his voice cracked, then steadied. She told me she never died in town. She said people lied about that, said she was forced to leave after a fight. Men threatened her. It was about land, always about land. Eli's head whipped toward him, storm gray eyes burning. Land? Malachi nodded. She told me once, when we had to run again, that men wanted her gone because of land. She never gave names, but she said those men were the same who drove her kin from this valley. She said we'd never be safe as long as they lived. Eli's hands shook as he pressed them to the cross. Memories swarmed him. Clara laughing as she braided her hair. Clara leading a foal across this very ridge. Clara's fierce spirit standing up to injustice with a courage far greater than his own. And then, the night she vanished, the endless years of silence, the whispers in town that she had died, that she had abandoned him. Now her son sat beside him, thin, shoulders hunched, eyes so much like hers it hurt to look. His voice broke. She was telling the truth. Even in dying, she tried to keep you safe. Malachi's lip trembled. She told me to guard this. He lifted the locket, silver dull in the gray light. She said it belonged to the man with storm eyes. That I'd know one day who he was. Eli's breath shuddered. He pressed a palm to his own chest. That man was me. Malachi's face twisted with confusion and grief, torn between doubt and desperate hope. Rust nickered softly, stamping once as though to anchor them to the earth. Eli rose slowly, leaning on his knees, shoulders bent under invisible weight. His gaze swept across the graveyard, then fixed on the horizon. There was one man behind it all, he muttered. Barrett Cole. The name left his lips like a curse. He spat in the dirt. Cole wanted every acre of this valley. He bribed sheriffs, bought lawmen, ruined families. He came for me years ago, took everything I built, drove us from our ranch. And now, his voice cracked with fury. Now I know he hunted Clara too. He couldn't let her live if she stood in his way. Malachi's eyes widened. Mama always feared someone would come. She never stopped looking over her shoulder. Eli slammed a fist against the cross. The wood rattled. It was him. It was always him. The morning air grew tense. Rust's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. His body stiffened, muscles coiling. Then came the sound, hoofbeats. Slow at first, then steady, deliberate. The clink of metal bridles followed, echoing against the canyon walls. Eli spun, hand dropping to the revolver on his hip. Malachi stiffened behind him. From the ridge above, 3 riders appeared, silhouettes framed by the rising sun. At the front rode a man heavy-set but tall, broad shoulders wrapped in a fine coat of black wool. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but as he rode closer, the beard trimmed neat, and the cruel lines around his mouth became clear. His eyes, small and sharp, glittered with arrogance. Barrett Cole. Cole reined his horse with a jerk, stopping just outside the leaning fence. His mount was sleek, black as midnight, its tack polished to shine. Cole sat as though the saddle were a throne. Behind him, 2 hired guns flanked, one lanky with a scar down his jaw, the other thick-armed with a rifle strapped across his chest. Both wore long dusters, faces hard as stone. Cole's voice carried smooth but mocking. Well, I'll be Eli Mercer. Thought the years finally buried you in that canyon. But here you are, haunting Dry Creek still. Eli's hand stayed near his revolver. You've no right here. Cole chuckled darkly. No right? This land's mine, Mercer. Always was. You just borrowed it a while. And now you come sniffing around graves that ain't yours to tend. His eyes flick toward Malachi, narrowing. And you've picked up a stray. What's this? Another thief, like his blood before him? Malachi bristled but shrank back under the weight of that gaze. Eli stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Malachi and Cole. His voice thundered. That boy carries more truth in him than you'll ever know. And this land, it ain't yours, Cole. It never was, Cole sneered, lifting a hand. His two men drew their rifles, barrels glinting in the pale light. Rust screamed, pawing the ground, ears flat, rage shimmering in his eyes. Malachi's chest heaved. He grabbed at Eli's sleeve, whispering, "Don't." But Eli stood firm, storm eyes locked on the man who had stolen everything. His hand hovered near his revolver, ready though he knew the odds. Cole's grin widened, cruel and certain. "This ends now, Mercer. You and the boy both. Graves don't lie, but sometimes they need filling." The rifles leveled, cold steel aimed at their hearts. Rust reared, striking at the air, his wild scream splitting the morning. Eli's hand tightened on the revolver. Malachi clutched the locket, breath sharp. Barrett Cole leaned forward in his saddle, smile like a knife. "Say goodbye." The graveyard froze, holding its breath. Cut to black. The graveyard was frozen in silence, the sun barely cresting the ridge. Barrett Cole's command still hung in the air. "Say goodbye." Two rifles glinted in the light, pointed straight at Eli and Malachi. Rust reared, screaming defiance, his hooves tearing at the earth. Eli stood firm before the crooked cross, hand poised above his revolver, his storm-gray eyes locked on Cole's smirk. Malachi clung to the locket at his chest heaving with terror and fury. Then the gunfire erupted, smoke flared, bullets split the morning air. Eli threw himself sideways, dragging Malachi down behind a toppled stone. Chips of rock flew as rounds struck the grave markers. Rust charged forward, body low, eyes blazing. He crashed into one of the hired guns, sending the man sprawling with a scream. Cole cursed, wheeling his horse back. "Shoot them both!" he roared. The second gunman fired again, the shot grazing Eli's shoulder. Blood blossomed on the old man's sleeve, but his hand stayed steady. He drew his revolver with the precision of a man who had lived his whole life by it. The hired gun swung his rifle down, too slow. Eli's shot cracked, echoing through the valley. The man cried out, his weapon tumbling from numb fingers as he staggered back, wounded. Malachi's breath caught. For a moment, hope flickered. Rust circled back, mane flying, muscles taut. His body was fire and fury, striking out with hooves that gleamed like iron. The first gunman scrambled to his feet, only to be knocked flat again by the Mustang's charge. Dust rose around them, the animal's scream cutting through the chaos. Malachi's eyes widened. "He's fighting for us!" Eli gritted his teeth, dragging the boy lower behind the stone. "That horse has got more sense than most men I've known." But the fight was far from over. Barrett Cole dismounted at last, boots striking the earth with authority. He strode toward the cross, pistol gleaming in his hand. His heavy frame cast a long shadow across the graves. His voice rolled like thunder. "You think you can stop me, Mercer? You're nothing but dust. You always were." Eli staggered to his feet. Revolver raised, the blood ran from his arm. His voice was hoarse but hard. "You stole everything from me. My land, my family, my daughter." Cole's smile sharpened, cruel and triumphant. "Your daughter?" He leaned close, voice a venomous hiss. "I killed her myself. She threatened to expose me. She wouldn't sell her silence. So I ended her. Just like I'll end you." And the brat Malachi froze. the words stabbing through him. His mother's warnings, her endless fear, all made sense now. His chest heaved as tears burned his eyes. Eli's world collapsed inward. For years he had wondered, doubted, prayed that Clara's death was not his fault. Now the truth seared him. Barrett Cole had stolen her life. His hand trembled on the revolver, rage boiling through every vein. Cole lifted his pistol, aiming straight at Malachi. Blood runs thinner than you think, boy, and today it runs out. Eli moved before thought could catch him. With a roar, he fired. The shot tore through the air, striking Cole's shoulder. The land baron bellowed in pain, spinning sideways, his pistol dropping into the dust. Malachi gasped. Russ screamed again, hooves striking sparks against stone. But Eli's triumph was brief. The wounded gunman, clutching his side, raised his rifle once more. His shot cracked, louder than all the others. Eli jerked, blood spraying from his chest. The revolver fell from his hand, clattering against a gravestone. His knees buckled, and he collapsed at the base of the wooden cross. "Eli!" Malachi's scream tore through the valley. The boy scrambled forward, kneeling beside the old man, clutching at his shoulders. Blood seeped warm through his fingers. Rust whirled, standing over them, ears pinned, eyes burning. He lashed out again, driving the wounded gunman back, forcing distance. The horse's body became a shield, muscles quivering with fury. Eli's breaths came ragged, each one shorter than the last. He lifted a trembling hand, brushing Malachi's cheek. Don't let him win," he whispered. Malachi shook his head violently, tears spilling. "No, stay with me. Please." But Eli's eyes, storm gray, fierce even in pain, locked onto him. "You carry her blood. You carry mine. You keep fighting." Barrett Cole staggered upright, clutching his bleeding shoulder, face twisted with rage. "Kill them both!" he shouted at his last man. The gunman raised his rifle again, but Russ charged, teeth bared, hooves striking. The weapon clattered into the dirt as the man fell back, scrambling for his life. Malachi looked up, face streaked with dirt and tears, caught between terror and fury. He wrapped both arms around Eli, but the old man sagged heavier with each breath. The wooden cross loomed above them, its shadow falling across Eli's blood-streaked face. The same cross where he had once nearly ended his life now became the place where it might truly be taken. With a final cry, Eli slumped back against the cross, his revolver lying useless at his side. Blood pooled dark beneath him. "Eli!" Malachi screamed again, his voice breaking, echoing through Dry Creek. He shook the old man, desperate, but Eli's eyes fluttered, dimming. Barrett Cole's shadow fell over them, pistol retrieved, aim steady. His voice was cold as stone. "One Mercer falls, the other will follow." Rust pawed the ground, ready to charge, while Malachi's cry of despair tore into the rising sun. The screen cuts to black. Eli collapsed beneath the cross, blood pooling at his side. Malachi's cry split the valley. "Eli!" Barrett Cole stood over them, pistol leveled, hatred burning in his eyes. Rust pawed the ground, muscles coiled like springs, ready to strike. Cole sneered. "One Mercer down, now the other." He raised the pistol to fire. Before the trigger could be pulled, Rust lunged. The chestnut Mustang thundered forward, a streak of muscle and fury. His hooves struck Cole's chest with bone-cracking force. The land baron let out a guttural scream as he toppled backward, crashing over the edge of the Dry Creek bed. His body slammed against rock and tumbled into the dust below. His pistol clattered into silence. The last gunman scrambled back, face pale with terror. Rust turned on him, ears flat, teeth bared, eyes ablaze. The man dropped his rifle and fled, stumbling into the canyon brush, leaving his master groaning in the creek bed. Malachi's heart pounded. For a moment, only the sound of Rust's snorts and Eli's ragged breaths filled the air. Malachi dropped beside Eli, hands pressing desperately against the wound. "Stay with me. Please, you can't leave me now." Eli coughed, blood flecking his lips. His storm-gray eyes fluttered, fighting to hold focus. "It's too late, boy." "No." Malachi's tears streaked down his dirt-stained cheeks. "You told me not to give up, so you don't give up either." Rust lowered his head, pressing his warm muzzle against Eli's arm, as though lending his strength. The old man's voice was faint. "Maybe. I still got one more dawn left." Malachi's small frame shook as he tried to lift Eli. The boy's arms strained under the weight, but determination burned through his fear. Slowly, with Rust nudging from the side, he managed to drag Eli toward the creek's edge, away from the blood-soaked ground. Hoofbeats echoed down the canyon. Malachi froze, clutching Eli tight. But this time, the sound carried authority, not menace. A tall rider emerged, broad-shouldered, weathered face beneath a deputy's hat, badge gleaming faintly in the morning light. Sheriff Amos Ridley, nearing 60, dismounted in a rush. His thick mustache bristled as his eyes swept the scene, the bodies, the blood, the wounded boy and man beneath the cross. "Mercer!" he barked, voice trembling despite its firmness. He knelt by Eli, pressing his hands over the wound. "Hold on, old friend." Barrett Cole groaned from the creek bed below, cursing weakly. The sheriff glanced, jaw tight. With a curt nod, 2 deputies riding behind him clambered down, shackling the land baron with rough efficiency. Sheriff Ridley's gaze softened as he looked back at Malachi. "And who's this?" Malachi lifted his chin, though his face was streaked with tears. "I'm Malachi, Clara's boy." The sheriff's expression changed, a flicker of recognition, then deep sorrow. "Clara," he reached inside his coat, pulling a weather-worn file. "I kept records. I always knew Cole's lies didn't add up. And here you are." His hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder. "You're Eli Mercer's blood." Malachi swallowed hard, eyes darting to Eli. "He's my grandfather?" The sheriff nodded. "There's no doubt." Eli stirred at the word. His eyes opened, weak but burning still. "Grandson?" His voice cracked, but a faint smile pulled at his lips. "Guess the good Lord gave me a reason to live after all." Malachi's tears spilled freely, but he clung tighter to Eli's hand. "Then don't leave me." Sheriff Ridley signaled for his deputies. "Get a stretcher. Now." As they moved, Russ stood tall, mane tangled, sides heaving. He guarded them like a sentinel, eyes following every motion of the captured Cole below. The sun crested higher, spilling gold across the canyon. By the time Eli was lifted onto the stretcher, his face was pale, but his chest still rose with shallow breaths. Malachi never let go of his hand, walking beside him as deputies carried the weight. Behind them, Cole was dragged in chains, his curses silenced by the cold steel on his wrists. His empire of fear crumbled in the rising light. Russ trotted close, brushing Malachi's shoulder with his muzzle, steadying the boy's trembling steps. As they reached the top of the ridge, Sheriff Ridley looked back toward the cross. His voice carried like prayer. "This ground's seen too much blood. Maybe now it'll see healing." Later, when the dust had settled and Cole was secured in the sheriff's wagon, Eli sat propped against the old cross. His body was weak, wounds bandaged, but his eyes were alive. Malachi sat beside him, small hands still wrapped in his. Rust grazed nearby, ears twitching at every sound, never straying far. Eli spoke softly, voice rough but steady. I thought this place was marked for endings. I came here to die." He looked down at Malachi, then to Rust. "But it seems God had other plans. This cross, it don't mark death anymore. It marks where a family begins." Malachi pressed his head against Eli's shoulder, tears falling silently. Rust lifted his head, ears forward, as though he understood. The sunrise spilled across Dry Creek, painting the graves and stones with light. And for the first time in decades, Eli Mercer breathed not with despair, but with hope. Sometimes the heaviest crosses we carry are not carved from wood, but from grief, regret, and years of silence. Eli Mercer came to Dry Creek seeking an end, yet found a beginning. Through a frightened boy and a wild Mustang, he discovered that family can be found even in the ashes of loss, and that it's never too late for redemption. The dawn at Dry Creek reminds us all, hope can rise in the very place we thought it was buried. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next journey of love, courage, and second chances.